Hello, I am Lucas, and today I'm speaking to Ryunocore. How are you, Reno?
Hi there. To the listeners at home, I'm very happy to be here, and I'm very, very glad to be able to do this. It's been a while since I got to talk to Lucas, and it's just great. It's really, really good to be here.
Awesome. So, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, yes. So, hi, I'm Ryunocore. I've been doing music on the internet for video games and anime and fashion labels and pretty much anything for about 13, 14 years now. It's been a ride and it's been really fun. People may know me from games such as Cavern Kings or anime like Sex and Violence and Max Speed. Uh, some EPs and tracks that I put out, like whether it's on niche uh, festivals like Komike or Heitasai. Uh, Mostly, if you really like visual novels, you probably have heard of me, and if not, then I did a lot of indie stuff, just a lot of indie stuff. It's been a wild decade.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, can we start with your story with games specifically? Like when you were a kid, did you play many games? What did you play?
Yeah, yeah. So basically, uh, Lucas and I are both from Brazil. Like for the listeners at home, culture was a little behind the times back here. Like we would get stuff from the US, but not like on the same time. Essentially, like a few years, like 4 years back, up until MTV caught us up with culture. So in the early 90s, my dad got into Atari. He wasn't super into it for a long time, but it was long enough for that, for that overlap between cultures where his video game stuff ended up passing down to me. As a very young kid, I got exposed to Atari, the NES. I got into the Sega Master System, which we produce here. We produced a lot of them here, folks. Tectoy is responsible for every Brazilian being into Sonic, and that's kind of how it started. See, whatever you're exposed to when you're a very young child will probably stay with you forever. And for me, living in São Paulo, it was video games and anime. I never had a chance at like a normal life. It was
Mm,
always going to be. So, yeah, early Atari games were my first exposure to this, like, from very, very formative years. I learned video games at the same time that I ended up starting learning, like, just learning how to speak.
yeah.
And English ended up being a direct consequence of that. Like, I still stumble sometimes, right? Like, it's normal, but, um, most of what I learned came from video games. Like, it's just how it happened for a lot of Brazilian people, actually. Like, if someone speaks, like, English in any capacity, they probably learned from, any of the early video games from, like, the not late '80s and early '90s era. And
Yeah.
that's pretty much what happened here. Like, I got into video games and just was really fascinated by them. And to this day, if there's anything that I would consider truly formative and that kind of gave me a career, and I owe it to them tremendously, is getting into Streets of Rage because Yuzo Koshida's soundtrack for that is just fantastic. And, Shinobi, also by him, really, really stellar work. And
What console was that?
oh, those both, they were both on the Sega Genesis.
Yeah.
The fantastic work because back then, like, FM was just insane. I mean, in the '80s, if someone didn't have a DX7, they were looking for a Yamaha DX7. For the listeners at home, that's pretty much the synthesizer that was in every '80s track that involved actual synthesis. Most of the other stuff was using rumplers. They were really popular back then. I feel like to this day, the Corgan one was very, very popular, but the Yamaha DX7 was just uh, a complete game changer. Really, a complete game changer. And FM synthesis being available on video game consoles was what put Sega very ahead in terms of tech compared to like Nintendo at the time. At the time, the competitor was the Super Nintendo, and there was a little bit of overlap in between uh the two eras, between like 8-bit and 16-bit era. But the direct competitor to the Sega Genesis was the SNES, and the SNES or Super Famicom, depending on region of the world where you were in, used samples,
Mm,
and those were vastly inferior in terms of just tech to having samples, a limited sample channel, but uh, mm, like just you would get more channels with SNES for samples, but it's just samples. Whereas in the Sega Genesis, you would get a few channels for dedicated for just to use wave samples. Very very downgraded, all things considered, not the best use of it. But you would also get several live channels for FM, and that was it was just unparalleled tech for video games. And to this day, it amazes me that they did it. And I got exposed to that very early on. When I got to be around 9 or 10 years old, I got into computers, and immediately I went from just liking video games to wanting to make them, and it led to a whole thing.
mm,
Uh, Learning to program as a kid is mostly just copying and pasting stuff, just fiddling with things and not really getting the fundamentals, but the drive is there. It's what I love the most about indie game development. It's pretty much punk rock. People just go for it, whether they have the right skill set for it or not, based on incomplete knowledge. That leads them to just completely different variations on things. And I think there's something beautiful in it. So I saw a lot of that with early game development. And that was just this drive to replicate that with, for example, the history of Yuzo Koshiro working on Streets of Rage and Shinobi and stuff like that. Back then they wouldn't have a lot of development kits,
mm.
so they would just make their own tools, and I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. The idea that a composer would just sit down and write code because he wanted his music to sound a specific way in a very limited environment. Like, to child me, that was magic. And looking back, like saying it out loud, I can kind of see why I ended here, like in this moment. And yeah, this is probably why people pay for, therapists. Yeah, you say a lot of the things and then it makes sense. Yeah, it's like it's not clear. The connection is not clear until you say it. But yeah, it's been pretty much my whole life in this. It's just beautiful to be able to just make something to just bring worlds to fruition, and like as an artist, I'm sure you can relate. Like you've done video games. There's no feeling like it.
Yeah. So, how old were you when you started programming?
I started around, yeah, I had a computer for like about 1 year and a half when I started dabbling in it. It was mostly scripting. It wasn't real programming. And yes, there is a difference, guys. Like we make up excuses that
Mm,
just it's very different when you start suffering for real. That's programming.
yeah.
And I would mess with IRC and just make chatbots that would do essentially just Final Fantasy style battle systems, just very, very simple things. They're like, to this day, like I feel like influence how I look at game design. Like, but that's beyond the point. As a child, you can kind of just mess with things. Like you look at stuff like BYOD. I don't know how many of the listeners would be familiar with it, but Space Station 13 started in BYOD, and to this day, like the base version of it runs in BYOD. It's just that BYOD is very different nowadays. But with scripting languages and anything that is like really accessible, children get to just experiment and do pretty amazing things. I see it all the time with Roblox now, and it feels nice. It feels like home when you see that there's still a lot of ways to express yourself and just make pretty much a new world with limited rules and a little of elbow grease, you know?
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, around age 10 to 11, I guess. Yeah, around 11. And I didn't do a lot of it. I I mean, I did a lot of it in volume. I didn't go very deep.
Yeah.
Back in the day, I thought that it was good enough to just be able to do a little modding if something was possible, like if it was very available, to do a little scripting and get things organized and minor things like battle systems and text for like chat rooms. But that was pretty much the extent of it. It's about that time that I got into music, like not seriously. I can't say that I was serious about it because I was a kid, right?
Mhm.
Uh, I still don't think that it's too serious for me right now, but compared to, how things ended up, yeah, no, it was mostly just learning violin. And at the same time, I got really into MIDI programming.
Mm.
And I feel like I got way more into MIDI programming than into violin because as soon as I had a chance, I got to trade this violin that my parents spent way too much money on,
Mm.
way too much money on, for a busted acoustic guitar because it was easier to make, to just come up with polyphonic lines, and I
Mm.
could just do arrangements better. They were mad. They probably are still mad. Like every time the story comes up, I get that hint of annoyance with it. Like
Mm.
every time I talk to them about it. But it's one of those things. It did bring us here, so they can't be too mad.
Yeah. Because you let go of the violin.
Yeah, yeah, because, see, coming from, uh, a Protestant background,
Mm.
I would, you know, go to a church where everyone played instruments, so it was normal to, for anyone to learn instruments and to play there. And, this is a recurring theme, by the way. I ended up realizing that I didn't want to play instruments as much as I wanted to just make things with them.
Yeah.
It had like, performance did not interest me at all. This is a surprise tool that will come back later because I ended up going to school for music, uh, well, like, around I don't know, like, maybe around 20 years ago, and
How
it
old
just
were you?
I was, I guess, a little more than 20 years ago. I was around 18. Like,
Okay.
I was a little. It was a little before turning 18 because I remember being, up for military service and still going to school for that, but it was for a very short time because performance was not interesting to me. I was very much growing and just getting used to arranged music because of video games, right? My whole life, just really into it. So
Yeah.
just playing one thing at a time was the most boring thing in the world to me.
Yeah. Okay. So let me do a brief recap here. So you started with video games really, and
Yes.
you were just amazed by the music, and you got into a bit of programming, MIDI programming, at the same time that you were playing the violin.
Yeah, and
But okay, go
pretty
ahead.
much just gave up on it. Just
Yeah.
gave up on violin because the idea of performing was extremely boring, and
Yeah.
the more I played with music, the more I realized that I liked it. But it had to be about making music because I was just used to perfectly timed, program music in a context of something, which in most cases was video games.
Yeah. So it was just a composition tool. The instrument was more like a composition tool than something to perform with.
Exactly, exactly. I to this day I keep buying instruments and I dread the time that I ever have to track them.
Mm.
I do, but I it's far from my favorite thing because if I have a computer in front of me and a normal keyboard, not necessarily like a MIDI keyboard or a synthesizer. I do have them, like, uh, just plenty of them. Like, at this point, I'm done buying them because I don't have the physical space to keep getting them. I kind of ran out of space like 10 years ago, and it was a thing where like, okay, I should probably just stop. I'm just getting a lot of stuff that is not getting used. We'll get back to that later because the realization came when I went to the UK. But like, what that moved straight into just buying guitar pedals, by the way. Like, I just
Mm,
the obsession that leads you to just buy a lot of synthesizers is the same that leads you to buy a lot of guitar pedals and a lot of small things. It's the same kind of problem. Which
mm,
really, if you monetize it, you can pretend it's not a problem. It's just
yeah,
you're actually just doing it for work, right? That's the kind of lie I tell myself all the time.
yeah,
But basically, yeah, it's always been tools for composition. It's because it's what's fun. Ultimately, I want less for music to mean something in a vacuum and more for it to complement something, to be part of an experience. And if there's one thing I can say about background music that I feel like is pretty universal, is that background music is very much the glue for video games. It leads to ambience, right? It's what gets it all together. You've probably seen plenty of really good games with really good tracks. You've probably seen really good tracks in really bad games, but it's very hard to have a game that is just like considered to be stellar, or a 10 out of 10 game that doesn't have like a soundtrack that just keeps you thinking of it years later.
yeah,
Like when I was around 10, I got to listen to Yasunori Mitsuda's tracks on Chrono Trigger, and they stay with me since. And I'll forever be thankful to him because that's kind of what made me like want to do music, even if not professionally. Like I knew that this was something that I wanted to do, like there and then.
yeah.
But there was a whole lot of things up until that point. So yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Oh, basically, it's not viable, right? Like it nowadays it is. Nowadays you can just put your work out there and get commissions, and we had that the indie boom with Xbox Live and everything that followed it. But back in the day, the idea of you composing for video games while being from well, lower middle class family
Yeah.
from, a
Can
third world country is kind of.
can you put yourself back on that time frame, like when you were probably thinking about your career and which you were going to go to school for? You said you ended up going to school for music. Like you were thinking that, oh, I really love video games and I love, you know, what were you thinking? Like, was it possible to make music for games? Did that
See, I
occur to you?
I didn't consider it to be possible at all for a while because the reality was my dad is a mechanic, right? He was a mechanic his whole life. He started working when he was 12, and my mom mostly just cleaned houses.
Mm,
So I wasn't expecting to have that kind of comfy life, right? What I did, and what I still believe was the right choice at the time, was because of all this time spent with computers, I decided I could just end up doing this on the side, and I'll just try a more stable career.
mm,
And because I already had some experience with programming, after doing, just indie, just small things and BYND up until I was 15, I started to consider that, yeah, this probably will not be a career. And went to a trade school for web development
mm,
while I was doing high school. Like at the same time, I didn't wait. That was a mistake. Not
mm.
just because web development is miserable. Like that's the only way I can put it. Like doing it outside of the scope of working with a company, like doing it as a freelancer is probably the worst idea that I could possibly have had. But it also killed my drive for programming for a long time.
So what year was this that you went to school for web development?
I started on 2005. I was 15.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, around that time, I was still playing with music. Uh, in high school, still had bands and stuff like that, but it never went anywhere
Mm,
because at that time I had removed myself from the idea that I could actually do this for real. As a teenager, you're like, okay, but I will have to get a job at some point. I probably will not be able to, just get enough commissions to like at the time, the like or listeners at home, the industry was very, very young for indies. We were just getting Xbox Live Arcade and stuff like that. And the indie boom was just starting then. Up until that point, people would make indie games and some of them were commercialized, but this is a time where like Steam in its infancy. We didn't have the floodgates open yet.
Mhm.
Everyone would just have like there was a time, and this is gonna just really, really give away our ages, right? But like I'm sure you remember there was a time when shareware was a business model in which you would send out essentially a demo to people and people would play the demo and most of them would just play the demo forever and not even think about buying the game.
Yeah.
And if you really wanted to buy the game, you would print a form and you would mail someone a check, like in the mail. You would write down a check, you would mail it in the mail, and then at some point, this person would, cash the check and then send you a copy of the video game, generally physical, a physical copy of the video game. At some point, it would change to digital, but there were a lot of costs involved because we didn't have like one platform where people would just get everything. You would just get from from either the distributor or the dev itself. Uh, I remember seeing like uh, Jeff Vogel's Vernon series, like the early versions of it as a kid, and I bought all his games now as an adult because I kind of owe him from for just playing them so much as a kid. But that's the thing, I got it as a direct consequence of those CDs that people would just sell with a bunch of shareware versions of things and demos, and you could get them in any what's the name of it? Any newsstand.
Yeah.
Those used to be things for the younger listeners. We used to have stands where we went to get news, and we would get magazines with CDs that would just have demos, and that was good. We had a
Yeah.
really good time. It would last you for quite a while. It would be a whole summer of fun to just get a bunch of demos of video games, and that was the market that I grew up in.
Yeah.
So seeing how that was the reality of it, because like we were growing up, right? We saw how Brazil's economy didn't really lend itself for people, for people to be buying games, right? A lot of things changed since Steam came and Gaben kind of saw that, yeah, maybe we could monetize this better if we just made it through boleto bancário, which is for people who are not Brazilian, essentially just bank slips that you can pay everywhere. Like if you go to your local supermarket or any anything with a cashier, you can probably pay there, and you can buy games in that way. And that led to piracy pretty much being eradicated in Brazil for a while, which used to be a huge problem and is now becoming a problem again. But it goes it goes a little beyond the scope of this talk. The thing is, there wasn't an industry in which people would actually buy games here, right? Like people would just kind of just make do with what they have. Piracy was rampant. I did not see a future in this,
Yeah.
even though I was willing to do it as a hobby. I knew that I couldn't just be irresponsible to my family and like just not actually bring money in.
Yeah. And there was also nobody else around to making games as well, right? We had no industry.
Right. Even when people started like doing courses and stuff like that, and it was still very localized because I mean, as I'm sure anyone who had any experience going to college for video games would tell you, it's very unlikely that anyone going to college for video games will actually end up in video games. It's more likely than not that they will end up in a tangentially related industry. Like
Yeah.
I have friends who were top of their classes and they were just really, really good. But life does not work that way. And work for banks now. They all they're all very, very good, very happy, but not because of the course. Yeah, it's not ideal, but that's kind of how life goes. You don't know where you're gonna end. You just do the best with what you have, and you see. where things go. In my case, I believe that going to, pick up a subject in computers that would still, that would still be good. That would still be good enough. It would be stable enough that I could um, just stay closely related to what I liked while still having, enough free time to do it as a hobby. Because with the advent of indies, we started getting more and more game jams. And that was very fun. They still are fun. But what happened is that I ended up not programming as much
Mm,
because around the time that I was uh, wrapping up my studies with a trade school and finishing high school, there was the little change, right? There was the little shift where indie games started getting popular,
mm,
and there's no way not to get ideas when you see that kind of stuff. You think, okay, it might be too late because I didn't dedicate myself as much. I was mostly doing small things and not programming in any real language. Uh, I could only do web things, but maybe, right? And that maybe will stay with you.
yeah. But you had that maybe, and then you went to school for music, is that right?
Right. It happened that as soon as I was done with learning, uh, web dev and finishing high school, I ended up getting picked up by the mandatory service here. And
Mm,
for a year, you don't like they can keep you for up to a year without telling you whether you're actually going to serve or not, right? It's just how it works here. Not every country has it, but Brazil, has this thing where if once you're 18, you can be dismissed from military service, or for the course of a year, they can call you in again and do tests and see if they want to keep you or not. And I was one of the chosen ones that, for the course of a year, over the course of a year, I just kept coming back, kept getting
mm,
called again. That has an effect on whether you can get a job in a company or not. I had plenty of options uh, back in, early 2018, no, 2008. Yeah, 2018, I was already way older. And those options seemed great, right? Like I had some good proposals from companies to work as a web dev there. And by the time 2009 came and I finally got released from, military service completely, those had gone.
mm,
So I ended up doing some some freelance work, which not great, just not great. It's kind of what killed my drive to program because it felt like studying all that to get stability was like hadn't really worked out for me.
yeah.
And that led to just getting a bunch of dead end jobs, including working for the government, which I do consider to be a dead end job depending on capacity. Like, to be completely honest, if you're not, if you don't have a drive or a reason to keep trying to improve something, that's what I would consider a dead end job. Not really like, it's not a matter of like money or anything. It's just, you have to have a reason to get up in the morning and think, I'll do better. If you reach the plateau, is what is the point? Like, it is a job, and I'm not trying to dismiss jobs. They're serving a function. But if you want to build a career, if you want to feel actually fulfilled by things, I feel like there has to be some degree of challenge in it.
Mm,
It's a little personal, and it of course, like there's some degree of myopia to this, right? But I can't imagine myself just doing something without the challenge. Not for long. There
yeah.
there would be no point. And
And
that's oh, sorry, please go on.
sorry, I cut you off. What did you want to say?
And I was gonna say that this is probably something that I'm pretty sure you can relate to because it's kind of what why anyone draws because you
Yeah,
want to do it, and you want to do something better, prettier, and just keep striving for it because art is hard.
yeah,
Art is very, very difficult. Any type of art, any medium, just like, it seems easy in practice. Like, when you see someone doing it, it like, the theory might be, like, beautiful. I know it sounds funny to say it like that, but the theory is beautiful. Watching someone draw is is like, oh, it seems so much easier than it is because you're actually just putting your whole heart in it.
Yeah.
It's it's a terrible thing. It can feel ugly and like you're completely exposed, and it's the only way for someone who got a taste for it can kinda find themselves living, like, it gives you a rush like nothing else.
Yeah, I think that's one of the big reasons why I make anything. It's like, oh, I think I can do better. Like you do something and then you're like, well, I think maybe I can do better. Let me try something. And then
Right.
you do one more and one more and you keep going. Um, but were you making stuff meanwhile, like all of this adventures in web development and were
I
you
was
making
trying.
music?
See, I was trying.
Mm,
That's the problem. Nowadays, I would look at myself and say, "No, I wasn't actually making anything. I was doing things and not showing other people. I was making snippets and never finishing anything." I I believe that in that time, in between, like, graduating from high school and the trade school and actually getting to work with music, in that in between area, I wasn't actually doing anything because I wasn't pushing myself to finish.
mm,
It's so much worse than when I was a kid or just a teenager, just doing things, small things, and getting them done.
yeah,
And if there's anything that I could recommend to anyone listening that is in a similar situation as this, just do something small. Just
yeah,
actually go there and do something small, and you will learn so much more from finishing a task, actually bringing it to completion, than from, just playing around. Because
yeah,
that's what it is. If you don't finish, it's just playing around. Like at the time, I wrote a couple novels, and they were terrible, but I finished them, and those were the things that I was actually finishing. Because music, I just kept starting and not finishing anything because
mm,
I was either too tired or I didn't feel inspired. I kept making up excuses for not actually, putting myself out there and saying, "Oh, this is finished, and I can show this to people."
yeah,
Because that just protects your ego, right? Like it's what it really is. You're saying, "Oh, it's not perfect because it's not done."
yeah.
It can live in your head, as in it can just be in that space where it's like, "Oh, this has so much potential. I will make an album. It's gonna be a great album. It's gonna be I can make tracks for a video game. It's gonna be so great. One day it will be great." And yeah, until you actually say, "This is done," the illusion isn't broken that it could be something.
Yeah. It, I think there's a saying like that finishing is a skill. I think that's very true. But you threw me off with some information there. You said you wrote novels? Like I didn't expect that one.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I got really, really into anime early on. Like, it was a terrible idea. So eventually, I would end up writing light novels. And as a direct consequence of that, just from writing novels for just web novels, really.
Mm,
I was working on a light novel series, and I wrote some web novels for phones because back in the day, for the listeners at home, if you're old enough and you were already very into the internet around like 2009, 2010, people would read novels on their phone, and that was a thing. They just try to import that kind of idea from Japan to the rest of the world, and it was very niche, and most of them weren't very good, but people really liked them. So nowadays, when you see this kind of phenomenon with independent comics, especially like from Korea, which are incredibly popular with women, by the way, this is a direct consequence of that, of people just doing web novels because it makes it accessible to everyone. And it's a great thing. It's honestly wonderful that publishers are no longer in the way of, content, which was always a problem for artists all over the world. We can get into that later, but it's basically anything indie. It's good. It leads to progress. It will be commodified at some point, but it's the actual revolution.
Did you stick to writing at all later, or was that your
So I wrote 2 volumes of this, and as a direct consequence of writing 2 volumes of this light novel series, I ended up getting, to do some collaborations that didn't end up very well with mangaka that I respected, and I also ended up writing scripts for a manga magazine, and
mm,
like, over the course of months, it just kept going because the process of actually working in the manga industry is very, very, very tiresome. Whenever I see one of those, manga about people just meeting with editors and never actually getting to publish anything, I feel it in my soul, it hurts in a way that I cannot truly describe to anyone because I know exactly what that's like,
mm,
and I just like, over the course of, like, 6 to 7 months, I just kept rewriting the same chapter over and over because in that industry, it's actually very common for people to just get, say, 5 to 6 chapters that they should have written, uh, before they begin to publish, and then when you get to that 6th chapter point, they say, "Okay, you can continue this for another 6 chapters or for another arc, depending on the size." And if not, it's like, "Oh, yeah, wrap it up because we're done. We might work with you again on a different project, but, this belongs to us, and you don't like, this is done. This is done." Which, as you can imagine, is not exactly the best way to write stories that make sense. So, I just wanna put it out there, if people, feel upset about serial fiction ending out of nowhere, like if a Netflix show gets shut off and you don't get a satisfying ending, it's because of stuff like this. It's because serial fiction is made with the idea that it can be canceled at all times.
okay. So, going back to your timeline, um, you were trying to make music, but not really finishing anything. You were doing more writing and actually finishing on that.
Yeah.
And you were going to music school at this point?
And I ended up going to music school as a result of like realizing that writing was not that fulfilling for
Mm,
me. So after the second book, I had already started the third, which I haven't put out to this day. Like it's been a long, long time. People sometimes still message me about it. It's probably never happening, and if it is, it's probably not gonna be good, but
mm. What's
what happened is
the name of the work?
oh, it's The Long Enough Shirio.
Mm,
It was published on Bakatsuki, which was mostly a website for, light novel translations, and people liked it there. Some people, like but, uh, after I published mine there, a lot of other, English-based, writers ended up publishing their stories there, which I feel is a net positive for the world. Uh, sometimes it's all it takes. People start something, and
mm,
it's kind of what happened with Xbox Live Arcade because Microsoft ended up opening up the doors for indies. You know, we got we got people blazing the way, the way through, and it just ended up great for everyone. So at the time, I was writing the third volume of it, and I had a lot more planned, and just kept doing this. I realized that like, okay, this is probably not going to develop into something real. This is not fulfilling me in any way. Like it's nice that people appreciate it,
mhm,
but it's not music.
mm,
So because it was not music, I I managed to just, make a decision and actually sit down and go back to music school. Like instead of just thinking, okay, maybe I can just do this on my own, instead of like just learning from church, I'm like, okay, let's go to music school. Let's see what it's like. How bad can it be?
yeah. So,
Uh,
how bad was it?
Well, it was exactly what I didn't want to do in music.
Mm,
You don't go to school to learn to compose. You compose as a consequence of just wanting to compose. And that was probably the best lesson that I learned there
mm,
because you will, at all points, just be expected to be a performer.
Yeah.
And even then, people who are extremely talented, better performers than I could ever be, very often ended up being either hobbyists or just playing as a support to someone. And like, even if they did compose, it would not really get shown anywhere. Like, I got to see teachers that were incredibly talented. I went to Fundação das Artes. For listeners outside of Brazil, it's great. A lot of our biggest theatrical stars come from here. Like, it's the same school. It's I had the privilege of going to it because it's in the city that I've been living in for around 20 years now. It's a great place. It just wasn't for me. But I did get to realize there that I should just actually do it, because it dawns on you. They're like, okay, so you don't want to do this exactly. You want to compose.
Yeah.
Why aren't you?
So how long into it did you realize this?
I realized it when I was around 4 months into it.
Oh, that was
I
fast.
Oh, yeah, but the thing that was omitted from that is that, I was supposed to be there for, like, couple times a week, and I just went every single day.
Mm,
I would u They would have this wonderful system where you could just slot in time to just use instruments, because not everyone, of course, can afford, the instruments that they would teach there. So even when I wasn't getting tutored, on any particular instrument, or, doing, all my mandatory classes, I would be there,
mhm,
just training double bass or guitar or anything like that. And it would like, any free time that I had, I was spending there.
mhm,
I just brute forced it, and I got to, interact with a lot of people, just talk to a lot of musicians and artists, because they have, they have theater there, they have arts, like fine arts, and they have music, and it's a wonderful, wonderful place. And I just realized that pretty much no one there was going to come out to be a composer.
mm.
From talking to the teachers and asking, like, "This is something I'm interested in, like, is this the right path?" And they're like, I mean, it is very good basic skills that you will get for this, but, like, it it won't change anything. Like, you still have to compose.
Yeah. That's very, honest of them, I guess, to tell you outright, "Hey, this is if you want to be a composer, maybe this is not the place."
Yeah, I really appreciated that. Because you could see that, like, even though they were successful, and many of them were, like, outside of being teachers, they were, like, just playing for artists that were popular, like, even following them on tours outside of, their obligations and stuff like that, or just playing in the night, like, in bars, like, stuff like that. It wasn't it wasn't in their best interest to keep me there, but it also wasn't in like, there was nothing in it for them to just tell me the truth, for them to just tell me the truth, because all in all, it's still a student, right? Like, there's a limit to how much you can tell essentially of someone and think that like, it won't impact their life. So I
Mm,
appreciate it a lot, and I realized, yeah, this is getting me closer to doing the things that I don't want to do,
mm.
and not to the things I do want to do.
Well, yeah. So that's so far that's been a long path of, "Hey, I'm gonna try this," and that's like, "Oh, this is not exactly what I want," so I'm gonna redirect. So you go from web development to writing and now to a music school. And I mean, I'm sure you learned along the way from all of these things, but now you're like, "Well, I've tried a bunch of stuff and nothing seems to be exactly what I want. What now? What do you do?"
N Nothing filled the gap
Yeah.
that I had from, like, just being a kid and just playing with MIDI, just actually writing stuff and not caring that it wasn't perfect, that it wasn't exactly how I imagined it, that it wasn't studio quality. And so I just went back home and just started playing with music again.
Hmm.
And I wasn't expecting anything out of it, and just kept doing it. And the at some point, I ended up working for the government, like in in just a government facility, just essentially just doing uh zoning and opening and closing of companies, like just paperwork stuff, right?
mm,
And I got really sick at some point. It led to me just quitting college because this is one thing. It's like so small that it barely was worth mentioning up until now. I did start going to college for a video game. Like I did start going to college for game design.
mm,
And by that point, I was already dabbling in music again,
mm,
and I was starting to finish tracks. So we were in the right direction. Video games, in college are kind of a detour. If this is not to discourage anyone, just doing some like just going to college. This is not what I mean in any way. But you cannot expect any institution to teach you to just do what you should be doing in the first place. Indies learn from making small gains over and over again. And absolutely, like a college education will get you on the right track to learn things that you need if you want to work in any industry. And especially in video games, like you will, if you're working in a team, there are some specifications that people will expect. For example, GDDs, you should probably know how to do those, even though realistically indie teams don't use them as much as, AAA. But what really happens is that people go to college and they start trying to make games with their colleagues, and that whatever that first year class in college is, it won't be like that by the end of the first semester, let alone the first year.
mm.
People will leave, people will get discouraged, not just because it's a lot for a lot of people to just get into coding or, this just not what they imagine college would be. It's just all things considered, if I were to recommend, to anyone a career path for game design, even if you were talking about AAA, it probably wouldn't involve video games. It would be just computer science and then doing video games on as a part-time thing.
Yeah. So you were doing like group assignments.
I did group assignments. I just kept going to it because if I'm going to be involved in this industry in any capacity, I should probably understand it a little bit, right? So that was the logic. I realized that what I had to do was music, and I couldn't just feel like a dead weight if that wasn't available. I had to be able to integrate stuff. I had to be able to, you know, provide in some way.
Mm,
Even if music wasn't going to be it, I would still end up like, if you're going to end up as a support for another composer, or just in audio in general, you probably should understand a little bit about engines and how video games work, right? If you're gonna work in the industry, just knowing music isn't enough.
yeah.
Like, and that's kind of a mistake that I see a lot, but I kind of get how people get to it. Like in for me, it's like r/game dev, you generally get someone just coming in and saying, "Hey, so I made these tracks, and I really wanted them to be in a video game. So if anyone wants to use them, just let me know, and I'll I'll we can work something out." It's like that's that's not how music for video games is made or how any of this works. And I get why it's a mistake that is easy to make, but music with a purpose of fitting a scene involves understanding what the whole scene is meant to be in the first place.
Yeah.
It involves how, knowing how to integrate it into a project. It involves knowing how to export it for specific needs. There's a lot that goes into it that isn't just composing, right? So that was the logic behind it. Didn't end up staying in college for game dev for too
Mm,
long, even though it was the second time I tried to get some degree of higher education, because ultimately I got sick. Well, because I was doing that at the same time that I was working for the government, and I got a really bad pneumonia
mm.
as a result of being right under an industrial sized air conditioner.
Oh,
Turns out that was not good planning by whoever designed the place.
Yeah.
In that time that I stayed at home, I just kept working on music. Like, my lungs completely busted, and I could only stay in bed, so I just kept working on music.
Wow.
It wasn't there are good things that come out of bad things is my whole point. There was as you can see, up until now, it's just been, like, a series of starts and stops, and that's kind of how game dev is. Like, you just don't end up in it as your first plan for a lot of people. After that, I ended up working a bunch more of dead-end jobs, but at that point, because I kept making tracks and I kept just actually putting them out there, I was starting to get commissions. And one day, in a really, really, really crappy dead-end job, I realized that I was losing money by not doing commissions full time.
Mm,
It's not a point where you think that you're gonna get, right? Like, you're not aiming for it. It just hits you. Oh, it happened.
yeah.
I'm not supposed to be here anymore.
How did you get your first commissions?
So, because I kept making music, at some point, uh, you would think maybe I should put it somewhere, right? Like, it serves a purpose. I can kind of get what I'm going for. I started doing game jams, and people really liked it because it's not often that you get people that can actually do assets competently during the time frame of a game jam, right? Like, if we're realistic, game jams can be complete crapshoots. You don't know what you're getting. You don't know if you're finishing from, any new team. People who already dev, they can absolutely do something in a short amount of time. Especially nowadays that, like, restrictions are much lower where people are already used to just having, like, small libraries that they get ready, to just speed up the process. But we're talking about, like, 2011, right? And game jams were starting to become a really, really big thing. And there were many projects at the same time. And I had because I spent so much time making music, at some point I started making music very fast.
Mm,
And that led me to being able to work in several projects at once. I went from not finishing music and just doing, like, little bits to just doing it every day.
yeah.
At least 4 beats a day, like the whole, I believe Kanye meme of just 4 beats a day for a whole summer. I would just start every day making 4 beats. I would then make some tracks, and then whatever kind of work I was doing, translation, if I were, to do, an actual job, regardless of what it was, the start of my day was always to just make music.
Mm,
And then when I would come home or then do something, I would make music again. At some point, you just get used to it. Interface stops being, your enemy, and it's just second nature.
yeah.
Y- Just doing something over and over again. It's kind of like when you're drawing. Your first circles are horrible, and after, like, circle number 10,000, you just don't care that they're not that great because they are serviceable.
Yeah.
At some point, they become beautiful. Your lines actually, like, you can control the weight on it, and you're just used to it. You're used to the toll because of just persisting. Just you just stop caring, and at some point, you get decent with something, and soon enough, decent becomes good.
And then the people that you did the game jams with would invite you? Is that
Yeah,
it?
pretty much. I kept working in game jams with so many people at once that by law of numbers, some of them would end up, getting back to me.
Yeah.
And I realized, okay, this is something that I can actually do. I got to the point where this is not terrible. This is not something that I should be ashamed of. This is a desirable skill. So I started using freelance websites, such as, like, back in the day it was Odesk. Nowadays, I guess it's Upwork. and freelancer.com and similar websites. And it turns out, because the barrier of entry for music has always been so low on computers, the competition might be like there was a lot of people competing for the same spots, right? Even if regardless of how much money people are willing to spend on any given composition, but it wasn't that harsh of a competition,
Mm.
right? Because there were so many. So if you were able to do music in any styles, you could end up finding work. Mostly because, like, for example, say someone is doing commercials, right? Like someone is has an ad agency and they need something done. They might need bossa today. Tomorrow it's not bossa. Tomorrow it's something else. Tomorrow
Mhm.
is a mock-up of some hip hop track. I've gotten commissions that were described to me as orchestral style Greek music and ended up being literally R&B with
Okay.
flamenco guitar. It's terrible. Like you get the weirdest descriptions in this job.
Yeah.
It it's insane. Like this is a story that I've told people many times, but to this day, it's like if I didn't have the logs, I just wouldn't believe in myself.
Yeah.
It's pretty out there. But that kind of flexibility comes with, first of all, not having that many hangups with what you're doing. Music is music, and you should just look at it as this should serve a purpose if you want to make music for things, be them films or commercials or anything really. But the most important thing of all is realizing that, like, there are no genres. You just do
Mm.
music. And just like if you're an illustrator and someone tells you, "Hey, can you do this mascot?" You're not gonna sit there and say, "But I really like doing paintings of, just forests." Like, yeah, sure, you like those, and it's great that you like those, and then you're very good at them, but you were hired as an illustrator,
Mhm.
and we expect you to be able to do this, and if we didn't think you were capable of it, you probably wouldn't have been hired for this. And that all that led itself to some experience, and it was very useful for a time where I just brute forced it until I got to the point where I realized, like, it just dawned on me, like, "Oh, I shouldn't be here anymore. I I did put in enough time that this is starting to pay off."
Yeah. You used an interesting word earlier where you said that like you didn't have to be ashamed of composing. Is that something that you had? Like, did you have some kind of hang up that
Oh,
maybe
yeah,
you shouldn't
absolutely.
be composing? What was that about?
Absolutely, because like, for the longest time, like, I guess 20 minutes of podcasting here, I pretty much described what basically anyone outside of, like, the point of view where I was would say it's failures, right? It's very much just failures. It's Venture Bro season 1 to 3. Things just going wrong. And whether it was because I didn't apply myself enough or because I didn't continue on a path because I got sidetracked, it was obvious that it wasn't working for the purpose that I had. Right? Like I kept telling myself that I wasn't gonna cut it. And that might have been mistake number one. Thinking that just because things weren't going right the first time, that maybe it wasn't for me. Or maybe because I wasn't born in the right situation for this, which is hilarious when you consider that I was exposed to video games my entire life and I had the privilege of being around computers from a very early age compared to like people from my generation. It just seemed like there was always something missing because I was focused on the things that weren't there.
Mm.
And that lend itself to not finishing things because they weren't be perfect. Because why would you just complete a track that you know is not going to get recorded? Or why would you make an OST for a game that doesn't exist? Why would you just work every day on something that it's just never going to get heard by anyone? And it didn't click until it was around, I guess, 21, 22, that it was really on me, that it was my fault, that I could blame all external factors, but it really was my choice because ultimately I had to put myself out there and just do these things and just keep improving, take feedback, positive or negative, and internalize it until I could produce better content to, you know, to just really let yourself be humbled
Mm,
by whatever comes your way and to just avoid anything that would discourage you, not in the sense of like you ignore it, but rather just avoid the like being discouraged itself.
mm,
You just take in all things, good and bad, and learn from it. And when you stop being afraid of failure, you just keep doing it, right? If when you're a child and you want to draw or you want to sing, you're not afraid of being told it's bad. You just keep doing it until at some point someone tells you it's bad. And a lot of kids stop drawing. They stop caring. Your mom doesn't hang your drawings in the fridge anymore or something. You just do it when you're a kid because you want to do it.
yeah,
And that kind of freedom, it it took a while to regain it. To get that thing that like when I was 12 to 15, I would just do things and just gain that freedom again. Zero expectations, just realize this is what I want to do regardless of what happens. And that even if I did take several, several actions that should have led me to more stable and more fulfilling overall, and more sane choices, they they weren't right. They didn't lead me to anything that I could say was good. It felt like something that was a dead end, right? I could not see myself progressing in that and feeling fulfilled. And I wasn't able to lie to myself to say that that was good enough, right?
mm,
So as soon as I realized that it was really me standing in the way of my own happiness, of actually doing something that I liked, and I started making things started working out. No, this is not me telling any listeners at home, quit your job. I just quit mine because at that point I was losing money. And I feel like that's the best advice that I can give anyone.
yeah,
Just pursue your passions and give all to them while being fed and having a roof over your head. And as soon as you get the chance, as soon as you're like, okay, this is obviously something that is giving results. As soon as you see that, jump at it.
yeah, yeah. That was a very powerful lesson. I think that you learned or that you realized that you should just do what you want and the consequences be damned.
Yeah. Yeah, because I was terrified of it. Like,
Mm,
because again, my family wasn't like particularly wealthy. Like we were doing really well when I was very much like a toddler, and then it all disappeared. Like it just went really poorly, which is why I felt so much pressure to just, okay, maybe I should just get a stable job. Maybe I should just work for them, even though it was the polar opposite to what I wanted to do, because I didn't want to put him to further trouble. I didn't want to be in trouble,
oh yeah,
but you end up in trouble regardless, because
yeah,
that's living. There's there's something truly liberating about understanding that, like, if you're going to be in some kind of stress, regardless, maybe you should try to be happy.
yeah,
And
yeah.
there was no way I was going to be happy without music.
And without composing,
Exactly. I had to make it. I just had to sit down and make it. Even if no one liked it, even if like, someone tells me it's terrible, like I would just do better next time. I'll just figure out what is terrible about it.
yeah,
And by just volume, eventually you get decent and then good. And that's how it works.
yeah,
So by that point, when I got from decent to a desirable skill, I started working freelance websites and getting paid peanuts, right? But I just kept doing it every day. Not just because of the money. The money did get me through a lot of stuff, right? Like, I'm not discounting it, and I believe that it's kind of how it starts for pretty much everyone. Like, it's very hard for anyone to just find stable work, especially as a freelancer. Not even just music, I'm saying, like, as a freelancer in general, but it gets you through. And at
Yeah.
some point, you just realize, "Okay, I am charging too little because I am seeing people who are willing to pay me more."
Mhm.
And I'm seeing others get paid more, and I see that, is this getting to the point where it's a desirable skill that you get a couple credits? And then I realized that it wasn't just me who was like this single person doing my best somewhere. That all these developers that I was working with, many of whom I still have friendships and collaborate with to this day. Like, while preparing for this podcast, I was going through emails and seeing like how it was like for the past like 13 years. And I saw so many names that I talked to, just this week. And I realized that it comes directly from understanding that there are so many creators out there, people who would do it regardless of what they get. If they get success, it's great. And if they don't, it's just another week because they can't be stopped from doing what they love.
Yeah.
And there's something like truly touching about it.
Yeah.
Like, you get to work with the same person over the course of like a decade. And not like the big successes, they matter in the sense that they get people to keep going, like in a financial way. Like, yeah, capitalism and all, we do like it when our games sell and when things get very successful. It's great, but that's not really what they're doing it. And it made me learn more about how to deal with other people
Mm.
because I could relate to them, because I knew that after that point, after the point of going through the motions and seeing that it wasn't gonna work to just follow, you know, a path that made sense on paper but didn't really in reality, that there was something that I needed to do, and I could only be happy doing it, regardless of whether it was as a hobbyist or not. And these people were the same.
Yeah.
So I I feel really thankful for all the people that I got to meet and all the projects that I got to work in. And I sure got to work in a bunch of them.
Yeah.
But it's it's beautiful in terms of like, you get to connect with someone's vision of a product.
Mm.
You get to just see a project come to fruition. It's communication. It always was. Just learning to talk to people and seeing them as you wish they saw you.
Mm.
And I feel like that's what music for video games ends up being in the end: communication. You want to make a scene make sense to someone. It's pixels on a screen. It's a bunch of drawings. It's a 3D model, which is really just math. And we make a lot of things, like we make shaders to pretend that there's sunlight, or that this tree is not just a PNG that we keep flipping so that it's on the screen looking, in an angle that is not completely terrible. But ultimately, it's someone trying to give you a feeling. They're trying to evoke a feeling. And that's what I feel is most important about art: just getting the power to evoke sensations in someone else. Regardless of the form of art, we get to just paint a picture or draw something in someone's head where it's like, oh yeah, this bunch of pixels right here, that's that's a tanuki, and he really, really wants to live in your village.
Mm.
Like, people just disconnect from like, oh yeah, no, this is a Japanese guy drew this, and now he wrote some other Japanese guy wrote the text and over, put a bunch of instruments together, and yeah, this is not an actual. We forget that for a second, and it just becomes a friend.
Yeah. So let's go through some of the projects that you worked on.
Okay, so over the course of like over 10 years, I got to work in a bunch of projects that I feel some degree of pride on, like that I feel like this is it's really great to have been a part of this. I got to be in Cavern Kings, which was a Vine game that it's it was on early access for quite a while. It ended up not getting to be completely finished. Apart from it was missing multiplayer, but we had a very successful Kickstarter campaign back in the day. It was a very fun game, and I got to do music for it, and ended up buying my first synthesizers as a result of it.
Nice.
Because for the longest time, I was just working in the box, just using computers for music at all times, and sometimes recording one thing or two, but not buying synthesizers. As a direct consequence of Cavern King's success, I got to start buying them, especially because I needed something to speed up the recording process for the tracks for it. We were trying to get the game done as fast as possible because the there was some degree of hype on it. We got featured in Kotaku. We got featured in Rock Paper Shooter, a bunch of blogs. And back then, this mattered a lot. It was not usual for indie games to get featured in those websites just off a pitch, right? It used to be like it was mostly big publishers getting those features. And I did a lot of the marketing for that project, which was mostly just bothering people via email
Yeah.
with a decent and okay pitch for the time. And it was great. It was really fun project, and I loved every bit of working on it. And since then, I've worked on a bunch of visual novels, like Tucker the Rebel Demon. I got to work on uh, look a lot of projects. There are like I don't know how the scope of this affects the podcast, but a lot of not safe for work projects as well,
Mm.
which is an area that I feel like people are just starting to realize is very, very big.
Yeah.
Yeah, like all things considered, there is obviously an industry for this, and people resonate with those projects a lot, regardless of you know public perception of them. Very passionate creators to this day are dedicating a lot of time and effort into making quality projects, and it feels great to be able to provide work that makes those worlds a little more full.
Yeah.
As a result of doing a lot of indie games like Xenoraptor, I got to work on When It Hits the Fan. I got to work on just a bunch of indie games. I ended up getting signed to a label, and I started publishing my music outside of just video games. I ended up getting featured in compilations in Japan and ended up getting to work in anime and with fashion labels. And it was really good. Like 2015 was a wild year. Just and as you can see, the timeline for this is like over the course of around 3, 4 years, things change completely. Just doing things every day works. People
Mm.
like just do things every day. Eventually, you get good at them. So I went from just being like a frustrated bedroom musician to just start getting features everywhere. Like I ended up putting out tracks on Skrillex label slash blog and put out an EP. Ended up getting to work for Capcom of all places. I ended up doing music for their uh rhythm game machines for crossbeats. I got to work with a fashion label for the Galaxy. Ended up working with Asa Chill, which is she's just a fantastic singer, and Namako Puri, the idol duo that was featured recently in Cyberpunk 2077. They're great. They're fantastic, really good people, and it's been a whole thing where none of this would have happened if I just didn't keep connecting with people because it's always one job leading to another.
Yeah.
There's that cycle. It's crazy how like not doing anything leads you nowhere. You just not finishing anything. And then as soon as you start finishing things and putting things out there, the next project just shows up. You
Yeah.
just keep working and then there's more work and that's every day. So around that time, I went to the UK and I stayed there for about 6 months. And in that time, I couldn't use any of the tools that I had acquired. And by that point, I was already addicted to buying synthesizers.
Mm.
I just, if I saw one and it was just a little bit beat up, very old, some of them older than I am, I wanted it.
Mm.
And especially if it was very like just pretty much someone trying to get rid of something that was just not doing anything in their attic. Yeah,
Mm.
that's the one I wanted. Just a piece of history.
Rescue it.
Yeah, no, seriously. I have a Pulley 800 that was very much rescued from a farm.
Yeah.
The guy came in and just said, "Look, this has been with the same owner for pretty much 40 years, and it still had the stickers because uh, basically it was a lady from a church in I guess a very rural part of the country."
Mm.
And, she got it thinking it was going to be like an electric organ, right? It wasn't the most expensive thing back in the day when it released because it was very plastic. So she put little little stickers
Mm.
on each note to keep the names of the note, and they were still there. They were so old, and I kept them because why would I get rid of them? Like,
Yeah.
it's a wonderful story. Yeah, they're still here. It's like a 40-year-old synth that just has these stickers that like, you could not fake this. It just is so old,
Yeah.
and I love it dearly, and I just kept buying those, right? And I use them in tracks, and but not as much as I wanted to because the problem with recording instruments and missions is that if someone asks for changes, you have to record again.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're using just virtual instruments, you can change the MIDI and it's immediate there. It takes a lot of the time between changes, and sometimes changes can be very small, sometimes changes can be very big. It leads to a lot of increase in time, and time is really what you're paying for whenever you're hiring a freelancer. You hire them because of their expertise, but now you're paying for their time eh, performing something for you. They're doing something to fit your purpose. So I ended up using them less and less. When I went to the UK, I just didn't have access to any of them. And by that point, I was used to them. I had gone from being someone who was okay with just a computer to someone who was spoiled, just spoiled rotten by Mercado Libre, which is
Mm.
pretty much our Brazilian eBay people. We don't have eBay here. We have a Latin American version of it where we do pretty much the same things as eBay. We just do it there.
Yeah.
And I went to the UK and I couldn't just stop working on music because I'm not going to take a 6 month break from what pretty much is breathing to me. And I was also doing an OST at the time. So a couple of them actually, but like one of them was very important to me that I was working on it for my girlfriend at the time.
Mm.
She had a project and I was working on it. And I couldn't bring a single one because just bringing a bag of coffee through like customs was already a good reason for me to sit there for a couple hours.
Yeah.
It was sealed. It was just coffee, but yeah, you can't bring stuff with you.
Mm,
So I learned to just use computers again, and something clicked again. Like, oh, you don't need more than this, right?
mm,
And then since I came back, I use them even less because like it's very rare for me to use any synthesizer at all at this point because I just got used again to work on just computers working less. And it it feels like a return to form. It feels right. So most of the tracks that I do, I will not touch any keyboard that is like made for music. I'm using a QWERTY type of like just the notebook keyboard or a normal computer keyboard that I plug in.
yeah.
And nowadays, I've been working with Renoise for about 10 years. I was working with FL Studio. It's wonderful. Don't let people ever tell you that it's not. It's been beautiful since day one. But because of this whole getting back into programming and all thing, I ended up getting attracted more and more to trackers. Now, for the listeners at home, trackers are how music on computers used to be made, but it's very, very different from a modern DAW, digital audio workstation, where in a digital audio workstation, you would input notes horizontally. A tracker is vertical and generally more sample oriented. You would hear for the longest time in jungle, even when we're talking about modern music. But more importantly, music used to be done in trackers for video games back in the day because that was pretty much all they had. It wasn't by choice. It's generally single line and you just put one note after the other and you have to program all the stops and it uses hexadecimal. So that's great, instead of like just normal values. And it just led to me going deeper into the rabbit hole. I
Mm,
just kept looking at tracks that were made with trackers. For example, like pretty much everything in an NES or the SNES. And nowadays you can look at those, and just see how they were made. You can learn tricks for, for programming them that way. If anyone wants, it's very easy to just open Unreal Tournaments files for that. And it's totally kosher and you get to learn a lot from just looking at other composers' music, which is not very different from seeing sheet music, but it's just better because you can play it in real time and it
mm,
sounds exactly the same. And it even tricks. It's great. Would recommend to anyone. But ever since I started working with trackers, I ended up writing faster,
mm,
significantly faster. It turns out there was a lot that I wanted from the sound of trackers that I kept trying to emulate with modern DAWs. Not just FL Studio, like I use Ableton, I use Cubase and all that stuff. But it wasn't natural. It was pretty much just makeshift
mm,
because that's not how video games used to be made. And tools influence the final work. Like if you're painting with just you know if you're using watercolor, it's not the same as just drawing with a pencil.
yeah.
If you're using a mechanical pencil, it's not the same as drawing with a pencil. Like there are things that are exclusive to some mediums, and it turns out there was still something missing, which I just found. And for the past like 3 years, I guess, I've been working exclusively with Renoise, except for video stuff. I still do a lot of trailers because honestly, if you work in this industry, get ready to do everything. You have no idea what they're gonna ask of you next.
Mm,
You just you just do it because otherwise the next guy who they ask is gonna do whatever you did and also that. And I, I've I've made a living of being that guy. It's just that movie with Jim Carrey in it, the guy that just keeps saying yes. Yeah,
mm,
uh, I think it's yes man in English. Yeah. So yeah, just be that guy there's always going to be work for you. Always.
Yeah.
It's good advice for any industry. Just be the guy who solves problems.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, oh, can you do this genre? Can you do this kind of music? Can you do the a private? Yeah, of course.
And then you do it. And once
Figure
I
it
tell my
out.
yeah, and this is something I tell my brother all the time because he's picking up programming and he's doing really well. But it's like once you've done the thing, you are the guy who had the thing. The thing is done, and you're the guy who did the thing.
Yeah,
And so it becomes easier to do the thing again and better. At
yeah,
some point, you just got used to doing things, and there's nothing to be afraid of. There's no like there's no failure. If it's not done, it's not done. Just do it again.
mm,
Just keep trying. And I feel like that's the biggest takeaway from today. Just you were gonna fail. Just don't let it stop you. And at some point, you're just not gonna fail as often. You're just gonna keep doing better and better. And at some point, it's just good. Just whatever you're doing, that's great.
yeah. There's a couple of things I want to go back to. One is you mentioned connecting with people, and I imagine that's a big part of your work, trying to understand someone's vision, understand them, what they want
Yes.
from you. Um, do you have a process for that? Does that change by person by person or kind of project, or is it always the same? What's that like?
Yeah. So basically, the baseline for that I use is I ask people about not only their game, but what the scene is going to be, where something's going to be used in. And if they have like GIFs or GIFs, I know that the creator
Mm,
chose to use GIF, but it's GIF to me, and it always will be. I'm an old man.
yeah,
Um, I would want to see him. And if there's any footage or anything like that, I would want to see that because I want to see where they're coming from. If they have references, I will not start any track without a reference. Because if I describe a color to you, it's it's pretty silly, right? Like
mm,
I could try to describe a color.
yeah,
It would be borderline meaningless. I could say every aspect of pink, and in your head it could be magenta because
yeah,
they're not that different depending on how I choose to speak. Words can betray you. Words are lies.
mm,
We don't see things, we see an approximation of things because our own vision of the world is colored by our biases and we cannot express ourselves perfectly. There are so many pieces of fiction and just so many stories about how we get in trouble for not being able to perfectly express ourselves. So I will always ask for references first because you
mm,
might not know exactly how to say what you want, but I'm sure you've heard it before. Because if you're looking for music from someone, you're probably thinking of something else that evoked that feeling in you at some
mm,
point. So, like, someone can say, "Oh, I really want this to be hip hop." And what does that mean? Like, let's be real. You
yeah,
have very early, like, you have Gangsta's Paradise and you have Rapper's Delight
mm,
and you have 3 6 Mafia and you get Future. And
mm,
there's Kendrick Lamar, how is "Not Like Us" the same as, like, pretty much nursery rhymes in the example of, like, Rapper's Delight, right? It's
mm,
those are in no way connected, but as soon as I hear one of those tracks, I'll know exactly what you're talking about because that's my domain, and now we establish communication.
yeah,
So as soon as I know, like, "Okay, I want this, but also I would like elements of that,"
yeah,
we're golden. It's establishing a common language. Like, I always tell people, "Please send me, references, and if you want specific elements or any vibes or moods, just show me, like, a YouTube link with the time of what you're saying." And as soon as you do that, because I'm used to music and you're used to what you're like, we're gonna be speaking the same language.
yeah. So it seems to me that like at least 80% of how you understand a project is by asking for musical references
Musical
specifically.
references and, just general vibe.
Yeah,
What like, I want people to describe to me what they're saying. If they have generally people have stories of their characters or, like,
yeah,
a mood for something. I want all that, but I do need to know where musically, because that's the part that I'm gonna be doing, it, like, fits with that. And as soon as I get that picture, I can take an educated guess as to what they want out of me.
Yeah. And then there's
It,
the context, right, of where that
right,
fits in.
right. And if there's anything there's gonna have like animation, for example, I do a lot of sound effects. Like again, guys, if you want to do this, get ready to do everything. Like someone's gonna come someday and just say, "Can you do a zombie?" And you better have a mic ready and some cough drops because it's gonna happen. It's gonna be you, and you're probably not gonna get credit as the zombie, but it happened. Okay, so we get to this point where you just establish this communication. You know what it is that they want because you've heard it, and they know what it is that they want because sometimes the reference is not just for me.
Mm.
People can have abstract ideas and confuse them for very, very, very solid ones.
Oh, yeah.
And it helps them to just have to find an example of what they want. Because if they don't have an example of what they want, and I'm sure you've come across that, like doing if you're doing our commissions, like it's very simple for someone to say, "Oh, I want something like this, but not exactly this."
Mm.
And you're like, "But what is it then?"
Yeah.
And that's the point where no person working directly for someone else wants to be in. To not know where the finish line is, to not have any idea of what is the actual goal. And sometimes people don't know exactly what they want. They want a feeling, but it's not quite there. And if you're working under that parameters, like those parameters, you're probably going to be in for frustration for both sides. We don't want that. We want solved problems.
Yeah.
If we want to solve problems, we need to know what the problems are and how we solve them. In this case, generally the problem is there is a scene and we need something that fits the scene, or a number of scenes and we need something that fits those scenes. And sometimes, like, I want this to also remind me of the theme of something else, and leitmotifs are a fantastic tool for that. And
Mm.
ever since Undertale, I get someone asking for them every week, which is great. Like it saves a lot of brain power to just think, okay, if I make a really good hummable line, I'm gonna be using it in like 10 tracks. It's gonna be great. People are gonna think it's really cool. It's a great tool to have, and in no way a crutch.
Mm.
But for real, turns out that if you establish communication and get to a point where you understand where they're coming from and what kind of project they want to do, what the context for it is, it's a lot easier to navigate through whatever difficulties may arise from imperfect communication, which is really all communication.
Yeah.
We just establish what it is that everyone wants and we try to make people happy. It only ends when someone is happy. And that's it. You just try to make people happy. Sure.
Yeah.
Make because whatever you do that fits that person's view of their world will probably communicate better to someone else than just something general, right? Like we don't hate just assets that are out there. They're useful and sometimes necessary for game devs. It's
Mm.
just there is something to be said about something that fits exactly right. The
Yeah.
Cinderella shoe, right?
Yeah, and I guess that's what you're looking for when you're making music, making commissions, like, you're working for that, "Yes, that's exactly what I had in mind," right?
Right. You work in that direction because once that is there, their project is a little closer to whatever they envisioned.
Mm.
Sometimes even more than what they envisioned. Sometimes it
Oh, yeah.
becomes something where like they weren't expecting and it just resonates right. And there's something so rewarding about knowing that like people like go after you to just be part of something that they like maybe dream for years, you know?
Mhm.
It's like you're now part of something. It's it's wonderful.
Yeah, that's probably the best, you can expect when, to make them surprised, like, "Oh, I wasn't even expecting this." Like, I was imagining something worse and you gave me something better, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's very rewarding. It's and humbling as well. Like there's just something truly touching about being like, okay, this is not what I asked. This is what I wanted, what I really wanted,
Yeah,
what I wasn't expecting. It's great. It's a good feeling.
nice. And so I imagine that it must be a different feeling to be working on your own projects like you have recently.
Yes. I
So what
finally, like, got
yeah.
off being lazy and just started coding again and then doing it for real this time. Like, actually sat down to, just learn, like, actually learn, not just take shortcuts.
Mm,
And writing for myself comes at a cost.
mm,
See, I know that it would be super easy for me to just sit down and keep making tracks before everything else. So I have a self-imposed restriction of only making tracks when I'm pretty much done with the base game.
huh,
It forces me to work really, really hard because I want to get to the good part
okay,
like as soon as possible. It's
I see.
like every day that I put in to like that I code a feature or something, it's like a day that I'm closer to actually getting to do the soundtrack.
Mm,
And then I just take like a week, a month to do it, and it's a magical feeling because it's like there are no restrictions. Like I love working with clients, but like there's no client. The
yeah,
person that I need to make happy is me, and the game is gonna sound exactly how I wanted
mm,
because it's me doing it, and through essentially brute forcing experience, throughout the years, just doing music again and again and again, I got to the point where it feels nice. It feels right. And it feels like just establishing a connection with kid me who wanted to be doing this.
yeah,
It's like the result, like of the game matters less than the process itself. And I feel like there's something magical about that, just enjoying the process. It it's what led me to get to, turn this into a career, just learning to enjoy the process and just do it over and over. And recently I got to rap. I mean, I will need to do changes visually, but because it's looking like a little like programmer art, right? But mechanically it works on one game, the tutorial, and we're finishing up. We've been doing rebalancing the past 2 weeks on Dungeon Trail, which is our main project for this year. Uh, and it's been wonderful because I finally got to do, a soundtrack in a style that, of what I wanted for years. I got to do pretty much just a hi-fi version of whatever you would get from anything from PC-98 to the SNES. It's just a simple game with simple rules where you just cheat a dice and it sounds exactly like what I wanted. And everything that I went through, including all that that brought me here.
mm,
And instead of just feeling like, okay, I've done this and now it's done, it's fine. I find myself thinking of more things to do because it's the chase. It's not just doing a thing. You get the most happiness that you could get during the process,
yeah.
and then you do it again.
Yeah, I mean, having done it is kind of boring, right? Because it's done, you can there's nothing to do anymore.
Right. And now I get to think of the next thing.
Yeah,
And then I get to think of the next thing. And that's it. That's you just keep doing it because just making something brings you tremendous joy,
yeah,
regardless of what kind of success you're gonna have with it, regardless of, whether it's profitable or not. And God, I hope it is.
yeah,
But there's no moment like it. There's nothing else that fulfills that that part, right? Like nothing fills the gap like just doing the thing.
yeah,
Oh, that's the lesson. That's how I got here by just realizing that everything else was just, you know, in a way of doing the thing. I kept putting, roadblocks. I kept putting really just problems in front of myself
Mm.
until I realized that it was all about doing it. Just you just sit down, you did the thing, and then you're the guy who did the thing, and the thing was done. And the next time you do the thing, it's gonna be easier because you've already done it. And
Yeah.
when you make peace with that, there's never a boring day, never an unfulfilling moment. You are constantly thinking of, oh, this comes next. And it feels like being a child again. Everything that was positive, with the difference that now you can afford things, which is great. You can actually, you're an adult. It's great to just get to be a child as an adult.
Mm.
And finding that childlike wonder again, just by doing something that like I would still be doing it if even if I like if it was just a hobby,
Mm.
even if like it wasn't profitable at all, I would still do it because it's just something that I love doing. And getting to do it as like a profession is it's a dream. It's beautiful. It's more than I could have asked for. And it's that kind of feeling that I try to evoke from people when I'm making music for them because I want them to experience that too. Because we should do to others what we want for ourselves. We should put out more in the world of what we want to see. Just spread art, spread beauty, do something cool. It's it's what it's all about. As humans, we could just survive. We could just, you know, just live in a simple manner, just focus on gaining things and being stable. Or we can do the one thing that is kind of unique to us, at least as far as we know when it comes to looking at other species.
Mm.
And we can just do things because we think it's really cool
Yeah.
and serves no practical purpose apart from being extremely cool.
Yeah. Yeah. That was beautiful. That was great. I really love that.
I appreciate it. And I feel like there's like I don't know, there's just something about seeing the world that way that I feel like was a positive change in my life. Because for all that time that I felt like I was failing, it did do a number
Mm.
on me. And it took just to just get rid of this whole glass half empty type of thing and go into glass half full to just actually start producing things for other people that made their lives better, that improved, you know, their mood, that gave them something to think about, or even just, fit a project better. It's about connecting with other people. It's about evoking emotions. It's about feeling happy. Regardless of what you're doing, yeah, just aim for that. Just put a smile on a child's face.
Yeah. That's great. Um, is there anything that you wanted to get to as well that you wanted to talk about? Or
I feel like this pretty much covered everything. I wasn't expecting it to get this heartfelt, but
no, it's great. It's beautiful.
yeah, I feel like that's pretty much it. Like as long as people communicate and try to be honest with themselves, they'll end up being more honest with others and just getting things done, and the world gets a little better because it's pretty bad sometimes.
Yeah.
Uh,
So, um, do you can you share with us where we can find your music, find your work, find your
yeah,
games?
I'm on SoundCloud, and I'm gonna be in pretty much every forum for game developers ever. So come and say hi because I don't believe in just having this, just being this faceless entity and connecting to people without, just through layers of, you know, impersonal things. I will try to talk to any dev that talks to me, and I do want to hear about your projects. If anyone's interested, just go on SoundCloud and look for Ryunocore. And if you see me on any forums, just come and say hi. I will be glad to talk because that's it. That's humanity. That's how we work.
All right. All right. Thank you so much, Renan.
Thank you. It's been really, really great to talk to you.
Yeah, yeah, no, this was absolutely beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.